Hi, the adoption of new technology is non-linear and difficult to predict, and that's why most technology startups and corporate projects fail to deliver on the initial expectations. If you're a product manager or entrepreneur, stick around for the discussion where I share some of the secrets I used to get your project started and to maximize the chances of its success. This is Careers Cast, a podcast for students and early career professionals who want to develop a successful and meaningful long term career in technology. I'm your host, Marcio Saito. Hi, today we are going to discuss the Gartner Group Hype Cycle, which is a model for adoption of new technology. And it's a model that I have found very useful over my career, both as an entrepreneur as well as a product manager within corporations. Let me tell you a story. In the mid 90s, I was very close to the community who started the internet revolution, right? The commercial internet. And I remember being very easy for smart people to look at the potential of internet connectivity, internet technologies, and dream of a life that was completely different from the life we were living at that time, right? So we are dreaming about waking up with an alarm clock that is internet connected and would give you the weather forecast and your meeting agenda for the day. You're gonna jump in your car, and instead of having to memorize how you get to places, there would be a car that's internet connected, and there will be a GPS system that gives you turn by turn directions. You get into the office, you use tools, productivity tools that are internet connected. You can share documents, you can have video conferences, and you leave work and you use the internet to socialize, use the internet to acquire new information, to project your ideas, to get to the news. And in the mid 1990s, we are dreaming of that. In 2025, we are living that life. And anyone that in the 1990s believed that that transformation was going to be quick, was going to be linear, or was going to be easy, they failed, right? It took 20 years for the internet to actually transform our lives and deliver on the dreams that the technologists were seeing when the technology started. And if you look at any technology that's transformative in society, it's the same pattern, right? There is a technology trigger. So let's look at the Gartner hype cycle model. On the vertical axis, you have visibility or excitement or expectations, and then the horizontal axis is time, right? So when a technology is unveiled, right, or is invented, we are very quick at dreaming of the potentials of that technology, and very quickly there is a hype cycle forming, right? There is a lot of excitement, the media starts covering, the general public becomes aware of it, the investors want to invest in the technology, and every technologist wants to start a new company to build the new technology and participate in that revolution, right? So with the commercial internet that happened in the late 90s, 1999, we are at the peak of the hype cycle, and then the bubble burst. Why did the bubble burst? Because eventually we realized that the technology is not ready. We realized that there is a need for a legal framework, regulation framework for the technology to be adopted. We realized that the users are not prepared to embrace new technology. And so a lot of times we need to wait for the next generation, right, to fully adopt and embrace the technology. So what happens is that the expectations, right, suddenly drop. There is a disappointment phase where a lot of people start saying, well, we thought the technology was going to transform our lives. It's not, right? The technology is dead. It's not going to change anything. That's the time where the momentum investors take the money off the table. That's a time where a lot of the startups die. And that's a time where we move on to hype some other technology, right? And only the people, right, who have the long-term vision and the persistence to understand that the technology will go through that cycle, they continue working in maturing the technology. They continue working on evangelizing and educating the users, and they continue working in building the solutions for the real use cases for the technology. And eventually, we go through the what Garner calls the slope of enlightenment and reach the plateau of productivity, right? And then the technology actually deliver in the initial on the initial vision. And that for most technologies, that takes a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years. For technologies that are as transformative as the internet or moving to the present, right? Gen AI, LLMs, and artificial intelligence, uh, those technologies that completely transform society usually have a hype cycle that extends for 10, 15 years. And so that happens, with every technology we have ever adopted. And I think a question we can ask is, why is it that we don't learn, right? Why is it that we cannot be realistic? And when a new technology is born, we say, okay, it's going to take 10 years for us to build this out. Let's start investing now, and let's start understanding the use cases, and let's start educating the users. And then we're going to go gradually, right? Not like this, but more like this, right? Why can't we mature technology in a controlled, rational way? And the answer to that, I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And the real answer is that human behavior does not is not compatible with the ROI models we use in companies, right? In corporations to decide whether or not we're going to make an investment. And that's a big problem, right? Companies are under a lot of pressure to generate results in 6 months, in a quarter, in a year, not in 10 years, right? So if we are rational about the adoption of all technologies, we wouldn't be able to make the decisions and make the investments, right, to make the technology viable. So in the 1990s, there was hundreds of billions of dollars being invested in networking connectivity, in laying fiber and cables all around the planet, right, so that people could be connected. And the same thing is happening now in 2025. You have the big companies investing hundreds of billions of dollars, buying GPUs and building data centers and trying to find enough electrical power, right, to power all these uh, uh, AI data centers. And that's not small money. That's hundreds of billions of dollars, and nobody would do that if we are being realistic, right? And if you're thinking it's going to take 20 years for those investments to generate a return. So you need to hype it, right? You need to get overexcited so that the decision makers, the CEOs of those companies, and maybe the government, right? They have the incentive to make irrational decisions and make the investments that perhaps never will see return on investment. And that's a necessary step in the adoption of a technology. And this is my theory. This is why we need to go through that non-linear curve of expectations for any new technology, is to justify irrational decisions that we all make, investors make, and users make, of getting super excited and believing that the technology is going to change our lives in a short period of time. Uh, so, so that's what it is. And the question is, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a product manager, right, how do you use that knowledge, right? And I'll tell you how I have used that knowledge in my career. I think the first point is the hype is necessary. So if you are a technologist, you're trying to promote, right, the decisions to adopt a new technology, you need to be optimistic, you need to be energetic, and you need, for a while, you need to believe that the results of that investment or adoption of that technology is going to change our lives very quickly. Even if you know that's not true, right? You need to convince yourself, you need to convince others, you need to convince your customers, right? So that we can make the decisions, right, uh, to invest and to start the project and to get trained on the new technology, or license the new technology, right? So it is the role of a product manager, it's certainly the role of entrepreneur to get excited about the technology, even knowing that that excitement might not be realistic. It is part of the process of promoting the adoption of new technology. Because the hype, so this is the first point. The second point is because the hype cycle uh, can take several years, right? It is still possible, right, that the investments are pulled out, that the projects are canceled, that the customers rejected the technology. So it is part of being a technologist to live with that risk in mind, right? And it is very common in a long hype cycle for technology that are really transformative. It is very common that the entities making the initial investments are not the entities that will capture the returns of that investment, right? So, if you look at the commercial internet in the 1990s, a lot of the financial investors and companies like Yahoo, uh, they made the investments, right, to create the infrastructure, or AT&T and the internet companies, right? And what happened is a lot of those companies no longer exist, right? And then Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, they all emerged from that. And they came actually later in the cycle, right? And they are the companies that succeeded as internet companies. They are not the companies who made the early investments in the technology or created the technology in the first place. So it is important for you to be aware of that. And if you are a pioneer, you might not be the ones who actually enjoy the returns of the investments. And timing is important, right? If you're an investor, if you're a product manager, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to know that timing is important. If you're part of an organization that is going to invest in core infrastructure, you need to be in the hype cycle, right? The moment for you to make decisions is when the hype cycle reaches its peak. If you are developing last mile consumer applications, you're not going to be successful very quickly, right? It might take 5 years before users are ready to adopt your application because the technology is not ready, the legal regulatory framework is not in place, and the consumers are not ready to adopt the new technology. So in 2024, 2025, right, I have seen many pitches of people saying, oh, I'm going to build a financial advisor chatbot, and people are going to invest their money using the advice of a chatbot using AI. Or I'm going to do a startup that helps people to lose weight, and we're going to manage their diets with AI, right? We're going to build this application that this travel planning for consumers. And it is too early for those applications, right? Unless you have the long-term vision, you have the patience, and you have the funds to survive the disappointment phase, right, and come out the other side of the hype cycle, it is too early to develop last mile applications. Uh, so infrastructure happens during the peak. APIs middleware happens when things are start to cool down, and then the right time to enter the market with last mile applications is when the market starts to slope towards productivity, right? And again, a lot of times the successful people is the first mover, but you need to make sure you can survive that phase. So time is important. Uh, if you wanna get hot money, right, from financial investors, yes, you need to take it during the peak of the hype cycle, but you need to know that as soon as the disappointment comes, the hot money is gonna disappear, and you need to be able to survive through that cycle. And the last point I want to make, and I think that's the most useful, is that as individuals, we are usually not driving the adoption of transformative technology in society, but we are managing products, right? And what I have found over my career is that the notion of the hype cycle is very useful for you to also manage um, iterations of a product, right? So if I have a successful product, I have a happy customer base, and I know I'm gonna have to create the next version of it, right? Maybe it's on premise, we're gonna move to the cloud, maybe it's web based, then it's gonna be a mobile application, whatever it is very difficult and it takes a long time for you to make that transformative technology transition. And the hype cycle model is very useful. So when you start the process of replacing the technology, you need to take optimistic, energetic, and hype up the new technology, right? You need to convince yourself, convince the leadership of the company, convince your customers and the market that the technology is amazing and is going to transform our lives, right? Once you get that commitment, then you need to be prepared, right, to manage the peak of inflated expectations. You need to know that the expectations are going to drop, and you need to navigate with your customers, with your leadership, with your engineering team, right? So that nobody gives up, right? You have the long-term vision, and you should know, we should know that introducing new technology is going to go through that curve. And if you do that, you're going to be a lot more realistic, right? And a lot more successful, keeping everyone in sync and not push a product too early, right? The first version is not going to work. The second version is not going to work. The third version is going to work, but the customers are going to say the old version is better, right? And it's going to take a while for the new product or the new technology to be embraced by customers. And if you're not prepared for that long journey, right, you're going to give up, you're going to fail, the project's going to be canceled, you're going to quit your job, or you're going to be fired, right? So you need to be able to prepare to navigate that cycle. And that's, again, it's very practical, everyday product management. You need to know that any refreshing technology will go through that same cycle that big technologies go through in the general market. Call to action. If you like this discussion, please share and subscribe to the channel. There is a lot of material, including from Gartner from the Gartner group online. I recommend you check some of their hype cycle documents. They map pretty much every technology that are in development today, and whether you agree or disagree doesn't matter, right? Take a look at the hype cycle model. Again, I find it simple, uh, excellent communication tool, and an excellent planning tool for you to plan the introduction of new products and new technology. And if you are an entrepreneur or investor, timing is important, right? Do not create false expectations because 95% of all the startups die because they don't understand the hype cycle. So have a good time with the hype cycle and see you again in the next episode. Bye.